Hey everyone, and welcome to this deep dive.
We're going to be taking a look at Morgan Housel's The Psychology of Money.
Oh yeah.
You asked us for the inside scoop on how behavior
Okay.
is really what matters when you're talking about building wealth. And let me tell you, this book really does deliver.
Absolutely. I think it's so interesting that Housel goes beyond just the numbers and the typical financial advice,
Yeah.
and he really dives deep into those often overlooked emotional and psychological sides of our relationship with money.
Yeah, and I love that he uses all these fascinating stories and like really interesting characters
Yeah, for sure.
that bring these concepts to life.
Absolutely.
One of the first things that he throws at you is the story of a former Merrill Lynch executive.
Uh-huh.
And this is a guy who's making serious bank,
Yeah.
but ends up broke. And you think to yourself, well, how does that happen
You would think.
if you know so much about finances?
Right. It's not because he lacked financial knowledge.
Yeah.
It really comes down to his behavior. There's a story in the book about this executive shattering a $500 lamp in a really nice restaurant.
Oh, wow.
And instead of just paying for it, he throws $5,000 at the manager
Oh, my gosh.
in a fit of anger. I mean, talk about letting emotions get in the way of smart financial decisions.
It's so true. I think about this all the time, and it's like, okay, you can have a high income, but if you don't have the skills to
Yeah.
manage your spending
Right.
and your emotions, then it's like it can totally derail
Absolutely.
your financial well-being.
Totally.
And it really is a good reminder that money can't buy you emotional intelligence.
It really can. And so to drive home this whole point about behavior being key,
Mhm.
Housel compares this high roller with the story of Ronald Reed.
Okay.
Ronald was a janitor and a gas station attendant.
Uh-huh.
So not exactly the image that comes to mind when you think of a millionaire.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. Ronald quietly amassed an $8 million fortune
What?
through disciplined saving and investing over his entire lifetime.
It's amazing what patience and consistency and just that long-term mindset
Yeah,
can achieve.
absolutely.
Even if you don't have that fancy degree or that like high-powered career.
Yeah, it doesn't take a genius to build wealth.
Yeah.
It really shows you that.
It's such an aha moment, I think, for so many people, because you think, oh, you have to be this or you have to be that
Right.
to build wealth. But that's not true at all.
No, it's not. And what I find so compelling about Housel's writing is that he doesn't just tell these stories.
Yeah.
He connects them directly back to his core message, which is that mastering your behavior
Yeah.
is the single most important factor in achieving financial success.
It really makes you think about like, oh, what are my spending habits? What are my emotional
Yeah.
responses to money?
Totally. Are you letting impulse or fear drive your decisions?
Ooh.
Are you prioritizing short-term gratification over long-term goals?
I have to admit, like that resonated with me because I think it's easy to get caught up in the day-to-day and lose sight of like what really matters.
Absolutely.
In the long run.
Yeah, and sometimes it feels like you need some complicated financial strategy to build wealth,
Yeah.
but it's much more about cultivating good habits
Mm-hmm.
and just making smart choices consistently over time.
And recognizing like, oh, where are my biases? What's my risk tolerance?
Right.
And really developing that approach that works
Yeah.
for you as an individual.
Absolutely.
So we've got behavior over
Yeah.
brains, but now let's bring in the wild card.
Ooh.
Look,
Okay.
you use the example of Bill Gates in the book, and you might think,
Well,
Bill Gates, okay, well, obviously.
Yeah, the perfect example.
Yeah, he's brilliant. He's an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
But Housel points out that, Gates was incredibly lucky to have access to a computer
Right.
at a young age.
When it was a rare.
When it was rare and expensive.
Yes, and expensive.
And that's what gave him that early exposure. That
Yeah.
played such a huge role in his success.
It really makes you wonder how different things might have been if he hadn't had that opportunity.
I know. And then there's the story of Kent Evans, who was Gates's friend.
Right.
Equally brilliant,
Yes.
but sadly died young.
Yeah. It really highlights that even with all the talent and the hard work, sometimes luck just deals you a different hand.
Totally. And it helps us to see success and failure
Yeah.
with more nuance and compassion.
That's-
Because
yeah.
you never know what's going on behind the scenes.
You really don't?
And so, we have these stories that we tell ourselves about
Uh-huh.
self-made millionaires.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, it's all based on merit.
Right.
But when you bring in the element of luck,
It changes things.
it adds a whole other dimension
Yeah.
to the conversation.
It's a crucial reminder that we can control our behavior.
Yeah.
We can make smart choices,
Mhm.
but we can't control every outcome.
Totally. And so we've talked about, behavior over brains, the wild card of luck.
Yeah.
What else do we need to keep in mind?
Well, we can't forget about the power of compounding.
Ooh.
And who better to illustrate this than Warren Buffett?
The Oracle of Omaha.
Exactly.
I was blown away when Housel said that the vast majority of Buffett's wealth
Yeah.
didn't come from, risky bets
Right.
or trying to time the market.
It's because he's been investing consistently for over 70 years.
Wow.
7 decades of letting his money grow and compound.
That's incredible.
It is.
And it makes you realize, time is your greatest ally
Absolutely.
when it comes to building wealth.
For sure.
It's not about hitting it big with one lucky investment.
Yep.
It's that slow and steady growth
Right.
over the long term.
Exactly. And to further drive home that point, Housel compares Buffett to Jim Simons, who's a brilliant hedge fund manager with incredibly high annual returns.
So he's making money hand over fist.
Yeah, but he started much later in life than Buffett, and that's a key difference.
Okay.
Even with those incredible returns. His shorter investing time frame means his overall wealth is actually less than Buffett's.
So it's more about consistency and longevity than it is those high short-term gains.
For sure.
I think about it as a snowball effect.
Uh-huh.
The longer you let that snowball roll, the bigger it gets.
Exactly. And it's not just investing. This applies to any kind of personal growth or skill development.
Yeah.
The earlier you start building good habits and investing in yourself, the more those efforts will compound over time.
That's a good takeaway for our listeners.
Even if you start investing a small amount regularly and you let it grow, you'd be amazed at the result.
You really would.
It's not about getting rich quick.
No.
It's setting yourself up for long-term success.
Exactly. And that brings us to another essential piece of the puzzle that Housel explores, and that's this concept of enough.
Oh, enough.
Enough.
This is such a good one because I think we get so caught up in this endless pursuit of more.
Yes. Always wanting more.
Yeah, and that can lead to, just a never-ending cycle
Absolutely.
of wanting and dissatisfaction.
It's true.
And, he tells a story about Kurt Vonnegut and Joseph Heller at a billionaire's party. And Heller says that he has something the billionaire doesn't.
He does. What's
Enough.
Enough.
And it makes you realize that true wealth isn't about just accumulating more and more. It's about finding that sweet spot where you feel financially secure.
Yeah.
And you have the freedom to live life on your own terms.
It's about aligning your financial goals with your personal values and really defining what matters to you.
Yeah, and this really shifted my perspective because I actually achieved financial independence at a relatively young age.
Wow.
And it really wasn't about having millions in the bank for me.
Okay.
It was about having the flexibility to walk away from a job I didn't enjoy and pursue my passions.
So having that freedom to choose what you wanted to do with your time.
Exactly. And that's something that Housel really emphasizes, is that money's greatest intrinsic value is its ability to give us freedom and control over our time.
Yeah, it's about reducing that financial stress and having the space to pursue the things that matter most.
Okay, so we've got behavior, we've got luck, the magic of compounding, finding enough.
There's a lot here to digest.
This is a lot.
Why don't we pause here for a minute?
Okay.
Give our listeners a chance to kind of absorb all this.
Sounds good.
And then we'll come back and we'll dive into the next layer of Housel's insights.
I'm excited.
Stay with us.
Welcome back, everyone.
We're back.
To our deep dive into the psychology of money.
Yes, we are.
Before the break, we were talking about the power of knowing when you have enough.
Yeah.
And how that can really shift your perspective on wealth. And it ties directly into something else that Housel emphasizes.
Okay.
Which is this idea that wealth is what you don't see.
Oh, I love that concept.
It's so true.
Yeah.
It goes back to that story of Ronald Reed,
Yeah.
the janitor who amassed millions. Nobody knew he was wealthy because he lived a modest life and didn't flaunt his money.
That's a great reminder that true wealth is about, those assets you haven't yet spent. The choices and the options that money gives you. It's not about the bragging rights.
No.
It's about building that solid financial foundation that gives you freedom and flexibility.
Absolutely. And it's about focusing on building that lasting wealth rather than just chasing those fleeting displays of status.
You shared that really powerful story earlier about achieving financial independence at a young age.
Yeah.
You said it wasn't about having, a fancy car
Yeah.
or a huge house.
It was about freedom. Freedom to walk away from a job I no longer found fulfilling.
Mm-hmm.
You know, having that financial security really gave me the power to make choices that were aligned with my values and my priorities.
And that's what Housel says money's greatest intrinsic value is its ability to give us control over our time.
Yes, 100%. It's about having the option to work because you want to, not because you have to.
Yeah, and to have the space to pursue your passions or spend time with loved ones without, the constant worry of financial strain.
Right? Or to design a life that reflects your own definition of success, not someone else's.
Yeah, and that takes discipline.
Oh, absolutely.
Patience, sometimes a willingness to delay gratification.
Yeah, and a willingness to understand that true wealth is often built quietly and steadily, not through flashy spending or risky bets.
So how do you cultivate that disciplined approach
That's a great question.
in a world where, we're constantly bombarded with messages to buy more stuff to keep up with the Joneses?
Hell's offers some really valuable insights on this.
Yeah.
He emphasizes the importance of defining your own values and aligning your financial goals with those values.
So it's not just about making money, it's about making sure your money is working for you.
Yeah.
In a way that supports your goals and your vision for your life.
Precisely. It's about recognizing that happiness and fulfillment often come from investing in experiences, relationships, and personal growth, not just accumulating possessions.
Mhm.
And that's where that concept of enough comes back into play.
Right.
Knowing when you have enough can really help you resist those external pressures and find contentment with what you have.
And choosing to focus on what truly matters to
Yeah.
you and building a life that reflects those priorities.
Absolutely. And it makes you think about all the stories we hear about success and wealth. It's often about, having more, bigger, better.
Right.
But Housel really flips that narrative on its head and encourages us to think about wealth as something much more internal and personal.
I like that.
It's about having that freedom to make choices that align with your values, not with those societal expectations.
And speaking of stories,
Oh, yes.
he tells this fascinating one about a dentist who, after a few lucky stock picks, starts giving financial advice to all his patients. And he's telling them to buy the same stocks that made him money.
Oh, no.
And you can guess what happens next.
I have a bad feeling about this.
What happened?
Well, some of those patients took his advice, and when the stocks inevitably went down, they lost money. And they were understandably upset. The dentist had good intentions, but he was letting his own limited experience and his recent success kind of cloud his judgment.
So should we never give or receive financial advice?
I wouldn't say never, but I think the takeaway is that given personalized financial advice is really complex.
Yeah.
It requires a deep understanding, not just of the markets, but also of the individual circumstances, risk tolerance goals.
Right.
And what works for one person may not work for another.
It's so true. Even well-meaning advice from, friends or family might not be the best fit
Right.
for your specific situation.
It really is important to do your own research and maybe seek guidance from a qualified professional if you need to.
Yeah, and that brings us to something else that Housel talks about, which is recognizing the limitations of history
Yes.
when making financial decisions.
Right. We can learn from the past,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not always a perfect predictor of the future.
He talks about how our own personal experiences, those early experiences, can influence our financial beliefs and behaviors
Oh, for sure.
and sometimes create these blind spots.
Yeah, he uses the example of people who live through periods of high inflation. They might be really hesitant to invest in bonds because they see them as risky, even if current market conditions suggest otherwise.
Yeah, because those early experiences really shaped
They do.
their perceptions of risk and opportunity.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
So how do you learn from history without letting it dictate your decisions?
Right.
How do you adapt your strategies?
Yeah, in a world that's constantly changing.
How do you do that?
Well, I think it's a balancing act.
Yeah.
We need to be aware of those historical trends, but also be open to new information and flexible in our approach.
He uses the example of Benjamin Graham, who is considered the father of value investing.
Yeah.
Even his formulas, which were groundbreaking at the time, they eventually became outdated.
As the market evolved.
Right. And it just highlights how important flexibility and adaptability.
Yes. In this ever-changing financial landscape.
Absolutely. You can't just blindly follow rules from the past and expect to be successful.
Right. It's about understanding the principles
Yeah.
behind those rules
Yeah.
and applying them thoughtfully to the present.
Yes. Staying curious, challenging those assumptions, and constantly learning.
And speaking of challenging assumptions,
Yeah.
He has this whole chapter in the book about the allure of pessimism
Uh-huh.
and how it often dominates, the financial news. It's like bad news is always,
Yeah, it always gets more attention.
it's always what grabs our attention more.
Yeah, and it's true. While the world generally improves over time, negativity just sounds smarter sometimes.
I know, and it gets more attention.
Yeah, it's like if it bleeds, it leads.
Yeah. We're wired to focus on the negative even when, the data suggests a
Yeah.
more positive outlook.
Well, and there's a psychological reason for that. Negative events are often sudden and widespread.
So they really capture our attention much more readily than that slow, steady progress.
It's easier to remember that market crash
Right.
than it is to remember like the gradual upward trend.
Exactly.
Fun.
So the question becomes, how do we balance a healthy dose of pessimism without letting it cloud our judgment?
Yeah, that is the question.
I think Housel encourages us to recognize that long-term progress that humanity has made.
Mm-hmm.
We need to balance that awareness of risk with the recognition of the positive trends that are happening.
So being realistic,
Yeah.
yet optimistic.
Yeah. Understanding that challenges exist, but also acknowledging the potential for growth and progress.
Okay, so we've talked about enough. We've talked about, challenging those assumptions, those narratives about money.
Yeah.
But there's one more thing I want to dig into,
Okay.
which is how our emotions, specifically fear and greed,
Yeah.
can affect our investment decisions.
Absolutely. This is such a crucial point.
Yeah.
It's so easy to get caught up in the hype when the market is booming. And we make these impulsive choices driven by greed.
And then on the other side, when the market's crashing, fear can take over
Yes.
and lead us to sell at the worst possible time.
Exactly. Locking in those losses and maybe missing out on future gains.
Yeah. So how do you keep those emotions in check?
That's where having a solid investment plan becomes crucial.
So you're saying have that roadmap
Yeah.
that you can stick to
Yeah.
regardless of what's happening.
Yeah, exactly. Set clear goals, understand your risk tolerance, and develop a strategy that aligns with those factors. Remember, investing is a long game. It's not a get-rich-quick scheme.
So you're saying instead of trying to time the market,
Right.
which is nearly impossible,
Pretty much.
about having the discipline
Yeah.
to write out those fluctuations.
Exactly. And Housel really emphasizes the importance of having that long-term perspective.
Mm.
Focusing on those short-term market movements often leads to emotional decision-making and missed opportunities.
I always think about it like surfing. If you're trying to catch every single wave, you're going to wipe out.
Yeah.
It's about finding your rhythm, staying balanced.
And enjoying the ride.
Yeah. And speaking of wiping out,
Oh, boy.
Housel reminds us that financial setbacks are an inevitable part of life.
We're all going to experience job losses, market downturns, unexpected expenses. It's part of being human.
And they can be challenging, both financially and emotionally.
They can't.
Because you start to doubt your choices.
Yeah.
And your confidence can really get shaken.
It's true, and that's why I think Housel emphasizes the importance of resilience.
Oh, yeah.
Developing a mindset that allows you to bounce back from those setbacks, learn from mistakes, and keep moving forward.
It's about recognizing that failure is not the end of the story.
No, it's not.
It's an opportunity to learn, to adapt, to grow,
Yeah,
to have the courage to pick yourself up and keep going.
exactly. Financial success is not about perfection. It's about progress. It's not about avoiding mistakes altogether. It's about learning from them and making better decisions in the future.
It's about having that growth mindset.
Yes.
Embracing those challenges and seeing those setbacks as opportunities for
Yes.
learning and improvement.
And that brings us to, I think, another really essential ingredient
Okay.
for long-term financial success:
What's that?
humility.
Oh, humility. Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because the financial world is often full of people who are just overly confident,
Oh, yeah.
always giving advice, always telling you how much they know.
Yeah.
And those are the people that we really need to be wary of
Mhm.
because, as Housel reminds us, the financial world is so incredibly complex
Yeah.
and it's constantly changing,
Uh-huh.
and nobody has all the answers.
Yeah.
Even the most successful investors make mistakes.
So it's about recognizing the limits of our knowledge
Yeah,
and being open to new information.
exactly. And approaching these financial decisions with a healthy dose of skepticism.
Mm.
Do our own research. Don't be afraid to ask questions and be willing to change our minds
Yeah.
when we're presented with new evidence, and not letting ego get in the way of making sound decisions.
That's a really valuable reminder in today's world
I think so.
where everybody has an opinion about everything.
It's about being discerning, staying curious, and always being willing to learn and grow.
And all of this requires patience.
Oh, the P word.
I know.
It's so easy to say, but so hard to practice,
Oh, yeah.
especially in our culture of instant gratification.
Yeah, we want it now.
Yeah.
Amazon Prime, all that stuff.
We want everything right now. And that mindset can be so detrimental to our long-term financial well-being.
Yeah.
House reminds us that building wealth takes time, discipline, a willing to delay gratification.
Understanding that compounding takes time.
It does.
To work its magic.
You have to resist the urge to chase those quick returns or jump on those latest investment fads.
Right. It's about trusting the process.
Yes.
Staying disciplined, focusing on that long-term horizon.
And understanding that real lasting wealth is built slowly and steadily, brick by brick, not through overnight miracles.
And this brings us back full circle to that idea of enough.
It does. Understanding what enough means for you can help you stay grounded and resist that temptation to constantly chase after more and cultivate contentment with what you have.
Yeah, and recognizing that happiness and fulfillment don't come from having the most.
No.
It comes from appreciating what you have and using your resources wisely to live a meaningful and purposeful life. We've covered so much today.
We really have.
From behavior to luck to compounding resilience, humility, patience.
Yeah.
I think the psychology of money really offers a fresh perspective on how we approach our finances.
It's not just about crunching numbers and making spreadsheets.
Right.
It's about understanding ourselves, our values, our biases, our emotions, and how those things influence our decisions.
And realizing that money is a tool that can be used wisely or unwisely.
Absolutely.
And it's about making those choices.
That align with our values and our goals.
And that requires a level of self-awareness that goes beyond just knowing how to balance a checkbook or calculate an interest rate. It's about understanding those psychological forces that are driving our financial behavior.
And recognizing that we're all susceptible to biases.
Yes.
We all make mistakes, and there's always more to learn.
Which brings us to, I think, another key takeaway, the importance of humility.
Yeah.
The financial world is incredibly complex, constantly changing, and no one has all the answers.
And even the most successful investors make mistakes.
They do.
So approaching these financial decisions with, a healthy dose of skepticism.
Yeah.
Being open to new information and not being afraid to admit when we're wrong.
Be a lifelong learner. Constantly seeking out new knowledge, challenging those assumptions.
It's about embracing that journey of continuous learning and growth.
Love it.
And that journey requires patience.
Well, yes, it does. Discipline, a willingness to delay gratification, because building true wealth takes time.
Absolutely.
Resisting the urge to chase quick returns or keep up with the Joneses.
It's about focusing on that long-term horizon, making consistent and informed choices, and trusting the process.
This all brings us back to enough.
It does. Understanding what enough means for you can help you stay grounded and resist the temptation to constantly chase after more and just cultivate a sense of contentment with what you have.
Recognizing that happiness and fulfillment don't come from having the most.
They don't.
It comes from appreciating what you have and using your resources wisely to live a meaningful and purposeful life.
That's it.
I think that's the heart of what Housel's trying to say in the psychology of money.
I agree.
It's not about how much money you make. It's about how you manage it, how you think about it.
Yes.
How you use it to create a life that's truly meaningful.
And fulfilling. Yep. Financial well-being isn't just about reaching a certain net worth. It's about living a life that aligns with your values and brings you that sense of peace, purpose, and happiness.
So if there's one thing I hope our listeners take away,
it's that your relationship with money is a relationship.
Oh, it is.
And like any relationship, it requires effort and understanding and a willingness to learn and grow.
Absolutely. Be mindful. Make intentional choices and recognize that true wealth goes far beyond just a number in your bank account.
It's about aligning your finances with your values and using money as a tool to create a life that you love.
Okay, so I think we need to pause here for a minute.
Let's do it.
Give everyone a moment to absorb all this.
All right, we'll be right back.
We are back for the final part of our deep dive into the psychology of money.
And I have to say, this book has given me a whole new way to think about my finances.
Yeah, it's really been quite the journey, hasn't it?
It has.
We've explored so many fascinating parts of personal finance, from the power of compounding to understanding your own risk tolerance. But I think there's one more concept that Housel emphasizes that really ties everything together.
I'm listening.
The power of narratives.
Okay.
He argues that a lot of what we believe about money comes from the stories we tell ourselves
Oh, yeah.
and the stories we hear from other people.
You mean like those stories about, self-made millionaires
Yeah.
or the idea that you have to, take big risks to be rich?
Exactly. And those narratives, they can be so powerful. They can shape how we think about risk, opportunity, success, even failure.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times these stories are based on our own limited experiences or what we see happening to people around us.
So like if you grew up hearing stories about, people losing money in the stock market, you might be afraid to invest,
Right.
even if logically it's a smart decision.
Exactly. Or if you're constantly seeing ads for luxury cars and fancy clothes, you might start to think those things are essential for happiness,
Oh, yeah.
even if they don't match up with your values.
It really is amazing how much, just our environment and the stories we hear can affect our financial decisions.
It's true, and it happens without us even realizing it sometimes.
Yeah, so what do we do? How do we deal with that?
Well, Housel says we need to become aware of those narratives,
Okay.
to recognize how they're shaping our choices, and then be willing to challenge those stories.
So instead of just blindly believing these stories, we need to ask ourselves, where did this belief come from? Is it based on facts or just, what I heard from someone?
Yeah, exactly. Does it fit with my own goals and values?
And asking those questions can be really empowering
I can.
because it helps you take control of your financial decisions
Mm.
and make choices that are really in line with what you want for your life.
Right. And it all comes back to understanding your enough.
Yeah.
Recognizing the impact of those outside narratives can help you define what's truly important to you.
And break free from those pressures to always want more.
Yeah, it's about choosing to live a life that's full of experiences, relationships, and purpose.
Not just stuff.
Not just things.
Yeah, it's about defining success on your own terms,
I love
not based on what society tells you.
Absolutely. And building on that idea of challenging narratives, Housel also makes a distinction between being rational and being reasonable with money.
I've always thought of those as pretty much the same thing. What's the difference?
Well, being rational means making choices based only on logic and data.
Okay.
But being reasonable means taking your emotions, your values, and your personal situation into account.
So a rational investor might pick an investment based only on how much money it could make
Right.
and not think about whether it aligns with their values or their risk tolerance.
Exactly. But a reasonable investor would consider those things because they understand that it's not just about the numbers.
It's about making choices that feel right.
Yes, and that fit into your overall life goals.
So it's like a balance between what makes sense on paper
Mm-hmm.
and what feels right for you.
Exactly. And Housel says that a lot of times it's more important to be reasonable than to be perfectly rational. Because our emotions, even though they seem irrational, sometimes they actually play a big role in how we make decisions about money.
So it's not about ignoring your feelings.
No.
It's about understanding them.
Right, recognizing that we're all human, we all have emotions, and that's part of what makes us who we are.
So find that balance that works for you.
Exactly, because there's no one right way to manage your money.
Okay, so we've talked about narratives, the
Yeah.
difference between being rational and reasonable.
Recognizing our biases, understanding our emotions, what are some key takeaways from all of this?
Well, I think the biggest takeaway is that personal finance isn't just about numbers and spreadsheets.
Okay.
It's about understanding yourself,
Mm.
your values, your biases, your emotions, and how those things affect your decisions.
Yeah, it's about recognizing that money is a tool.
Yes,
And it can be used in good ways or bad ways.
absolutely.
And we have to make choices that line up with our values and our long-term goals.
Exactly. And that takes a level of self-awareness that goes beyond just knowing how to balance your checkbook.
Mm.
It's about understanding the psychology behind our financial behavior.
Recognizing that we're all going to make mistakes.
Yeah.
And there's always more to learn.
And that brings us to another takeaway, the importance of humility.
Oh, humility. Yeah.
The financial world is so complicated and it's always changing. No one has all the answers.
Even the experts.
Even the experts, they make mistakes too.
So we have to be open to new information.
Yes.
And not be afraid to admit when we're wrong.
Be a lifelong learner. Always be curious and challenge what you think,
And all of this takes patience.
Yeah, it does.
A discipline, delaying gratification. Because building wealth takes time.
It really does.
And it's about resisting the urge to, get rich quick or keep up with the Joneses.
Focus on the long term, make smart choices, and trust the process.
I think that's really what Housel is trying to say in this book.
I think so too.
It's not about how much money you make. It's about how you handle it, how you think about it, and how you use it to build a life that's really meaningful and fulfilling.
Financial well-being isn't about reaching a certain net worth. It's about living a life that matches your values and brings you peace, purpose, and happiness.
I hope our listeners are taking this away.
It's that your relationship with money is a relationship.
It is.
And like any relationship, it takes effort and understanding and a willingness to learn and grow.
Be mindful, make good choices, and remember that true wealth is about so much more than just the money in your bank account.
It's about using money to create a life you love.
Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into the psychology of money.
It's been a pleasure.
And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in to The Deep Dive. We'll see you next time for another deep dive into a topic that will spark your curiosity and expand your horizons. Until then, keep learning, keep growing, and keep diving deep.